There is one detail in this file that sounds small at first, but the longer you sit with it, the more disturbing it becomes. A young woman disappears from her student dorm room in France. Her room is strangely tidy. Her winter coat is still there. Her laptop is still there. Her wallet is still there, with money and bank cards inside. But her phone is gone. Her passport is gone. And one large orange suitcase is gone too. Now, if that were the only strange thing, maybe someone could still say she left on her own. Maybe she wanted space. Maybe she wanted to travel. Maybe she did not want to be found for a few days. But here is the part that makes the whole file start to bend out of shape. After she disappeared, her phone kept texting her family. Her mother received messages. Her sisters received messages. The phone said she had a passport problem. The phone said she had to go to Lyon. The phone said she had a new boyfriend. The phone said she was going to Luxembourg and could not be contacted. So, from the outside, it almost looked like she was still alive. Except, inside the dorm building, around 3:20 in the morning, 15 students had been woken up by a scream. A short scream. A sharp scream. One student even texted a friend and said he had just heard something like the sound of someone being murdered in a horror movie. And after that night, the girl from room 106 never walked out of that building again. There are cases where the hardest question is not who did it. Sometimes the hardest question is much colder than that. It is this: if the truth is right in front of everyone, why does it still take years to prove it? This file stretches across 3 countries: Japan, France, Chile. It crosses almost 10 years of investigation, extradition, appeals, retrials, and a family that kept carrying photographs into court because they still had no body to bury. The case was built on messages, GPS data, a rented car, a missing suitcase, a scream in the middle of the night, and one very uncomfortable idea: someone may have tried to make the world believe a dead woman was still alive. Before anyone knew what this file would become, it looked like a missing student case. A Japanese student named Narumi Kurosaki had stopped attending class. She was 21 years old, studying in Besançon, France, at the University of Franche-Comté. Since arriving in France in August, she had not been the kind of student who simply disappeared. She was disciplined. She was doing well. She was considered one of the strongest Japanese students in the school's language center. She was preparing to move into an economics program the following month. So when she missed class for 10 days, the school could not just ignore it. That absence did not fit her. The last time classmates saw Narumi was on December 4th, after a dance class, around 4 in the afternoon. That detail matters because it gives the investigators a living, ordinary version of her. She was not running. She was not hiding. She was not acting like someone who had already cut herself off from the world. She went to dance class. She left with people who knew her. And then, within hours, everything around her life started behaving strangely. Police entered room 106, her student dorm room. Nothing looked chaotic. No obvious battle scene. No open sign that someone had broken in. The room was neat, almost too neat. People who knew Narumi said this did not really match her usual, casual way of living. And that is the first little crack. Not proof by itself. Just a detail that makes you pause. Her blanket on the bed looked unusual. A large orange suitcase was missing. Her passport was missing. Her phone was missing. But her only winter coat was left behind. Her laptop was left behind. Her wallet was left behind, containing €565 and her bank cards. If you are an investigator standing in that room, you have to ask a very simple question. What kind of person leaves for a winter trip in France without a winter coat? What kind of student planning to travel leaves a laptop and a wallet behind? Why take a passport and a phone, but leave the things that would actually help you live? And why does the room look cleaner than it should? But the room was only the beginning. When police contacted Narumi's mother, Teiko, and her two younger sisters in Japan, they found out something that made the case even more confusing. The family did not immediately understand why everyone was so worried, because they had still been receiving messages from Narumi. Starting on December 5th, messages came from her phone and social media. Narumi supposedly said there was a problem with her passport and she had to travel to Lyon, about 3 hours away, to deal with it. At first, that sounds possible. A foreign student has a passport issue. She needs to go to another city. Fine. But wait. Besançon was under the jurisdiction of the Japanese consulate in Strasbourg, not Lyon. If Narumi really needed passport help, the logical place would have been Strasbourg. And Narumi had already lived in France for several months. She was careful, capable, and used to handling school life abroad. This was not the kind of mistake that felt natural. So the Lyon explanation did not sit right. Then investigators found that a one-way train ticket to Lyon had indeed been purchased using Narumi's bank card. That sounds like it supports the message. But only for a second. Because when police spoke to passengers around the seat connected to that ticket, they said they had not seen Narumi. A ticket existed. But that does not mean Narumi used it. And in cases like this, sometimes a ticket is not a travel plan. Sometimes it is a prop. Her mother received another message. In that one, Narumi supposedly said she had a new boyfriend named Arthur, and that she wanted to travel alone. The message even included a photo of Narumi and Arthur. Again, if you read only the surface, it sounds like a young woman explaining her private life. But this detail is strange too. Because a few weeks earlier, Narumi had already introduced Arthur to her family during a video call. Her mother already knew who Arthur was. Her sisters knew who Arthur was. Why would she introduce him all over again, as if the family had never heard his name? And there was the language. The way the messages were written did not feel like Narumi. Her family noticed it. The tone was off. The habits were off. The words did not land like hers. Her sisters also received messages saying she was going to Luxembourg, would not be able to use Wi-Fi, and did not want the family to contact her for a while. One sister replied that the family was planning to visit France soon and travel with her. That reply was never read. After that, Narumi's voice disappeared completely. So now the file has two versions of reality. In one version, Narumi is alive, moving around, handling a passport issue, traveling, asking her family for space. In the other version, a 21-year-old student has vanished from a room that looks too clean, without her coat, without her money, without her laptop, after a scream was heard in the building. And if the second version is true, then the first version was not an update from Narumi. It was someone using Narumi's life as a disguise. When a young woman disappears, police usually begin with the person closest to her. In France, that person was Arthur. He was 26, had studied in Japan, and was studying in Besançon at an engineering and microtechnology school connected to the same university network. Narumi and Arthur met through language study. They became close. Then they became a couple. For a Japanese student living far from home, Arthur was one of the people she trusted most. Arthur also had something that made police look carefully at him. He had been near Narumi right before she vanished. And before police entered her dorm room, Arthur had already gone inside with others to check on her. That does not make him guilty. But in a missing person case, it makes him relevant. Arthur told police that Narumi had been emotionally troubled before she disappeared. On December 3rd, he spent the weekend with her and tried to help her relax. They stayed at his apartment that night. The following day, December 4th, Narumi returned to school. Around 4 in the afternoon, after dance class, she walked back toward the dorm with friends. Arthur met her briefly. They kissed. They said goodbye. Everything still seemed within the normal shape of a relationship. But by night, Arthur became worried. He could not reach her. Around 11 p.m., he went to the dorm to look for her. He knocked at her door. No answer. He was about to ask the building manager to help open the room. Right then, he received a text from Narumi's phone. The message said he was putting too much pressure on her. It said she had met someone else. It said she was with that person now, and that she would go to the city center with him for the next 2 days and would not come back. If you are Arthur in that moment, what do you feel? Shock. Hurt. Confusion. Maybe shame. Maybe anger. But from an investigative point of view, the timing is the important part. Arthur is physically outside her room. Nobody opens the door. Then a message appears, perfectly designed to make him leave. And Arthur did leave. The next morning, he texted Narumi that he could not accept being deceived. A reply came back saying she did not want to be controlled, that they should cool down, and that she hoped he would have a good day. Arthur tried to explain that he was not trying to control her. Like he usually did, he began the message with a tender phrase, calling her his dear little Narumi. The answer that came back was cold, I am not your little Narumi. That line is small, but it does something very important. It changes the emotional temperature of the messages. It makes them feel like a breakup. It paints Arthur as the rejected boyfriend. It gives him a reason to back off. And if someone else was holding Narumi's phone, then that person was not just sending random words. They were writing a scene. They were creating a reason for Arthur to disappear from the hallway and stop asking for help at that exact moment. A few days later, Arthur and classmates went back to room 106. Still no response. They got the building manager to open the door. The room looked empty, tidy, and silent. Arthur told police he had not touched anything. He also told them something else. Narumi had once cried to him because her Facebook account had been hacked. She believed the person behind it was her ex-boyfriend, a man she had recently broken up with. She felt trapped by that relationship, as if even after it ended, she still could not escape his control. Arthur did not know the full history. But when he saw the strange messages, when he saw the mention of someone else, when he thought about Narumi's fear of her ex, he pointed police toward another name. Nicholas Zepeda. This is where the first obvious assumption begins to slip. Yes, Arthur was close. Yes, Arthur was hurt. Yes, Arthur was at the door. But Arthur also opened the file towards someone who had been watching Narumi from much farther away. Someone who was supposed to be in her past, not standing in her final night. Police checked Narumi's phone location data. The phone had been near a restaurant in a hotel about 25 kilometers south of Besançon on the evening of December 4th. The bill had been paid with a Chilean bank card. A waitress remembered a young Asian woman, well-dressed, about 1.70 meters tall, with a young man. They left around 10 p.m. When shown a photo, the waitress identified the man as Nicholas Zepeda. So now the file shifts again. The last person known to have dinner with Narumi was not Arthur. Not a classmate. Not someone from the dorm. It was her former boyfriend from Chile. And this was not just some accidental tourist passing through. Police checked Nicholas's travel and rental records. On October 17th, while he was still in Chile, Nicholas had booked a rental car in France. On November 30th, he landed in France. He took a long-distance bus to Dijon to pick up the car. He returned that car on December 7th and left the country the same day. That means he was in France for 1 week. A very specific week. The week Narumi disappeared. The rented car became one of the strongest witnesses in the case. Not a human witness. A machine witness. GPS does not explain motives. It does not describe emotions. It does not say whether someone cried, lied, or panicked. It simply records movement. And when investigators looked at the GPS data from Nicholas's car, the timeline began to look less like coincidence and more like preparation. Around 1 a.m. on December 1st, not long after arriving in France, Nicholas drove near Narumi's dorm. The car appeared around the building several times and did not leave until about 8 in the morning. Later that day, he went to a shopping center and bought 3 items: a 5-liter fuel can, a box of matches, and a bottle of chlorine-based cleaning product. 1 item can be explained. 2 items can maybe be explained. 3 items, bought right before a disappearance, start to feel different. That evening, his car traveled to a forested area about 50 kilometers from Besançon. The area had dense vegetation and waterways. A place like that is difficult to search. The car stayed there for about 2 hours. Again, by itself, a drive into a forest is not proof of murder. But keep that detail in your hand, because it becomes much heavier later. On December 2nd, Nicholas appeared at Narumi's school. 2 students saw him in the shared kitchen of the dorm building. They said he seemed low, maybe sad. He greeted them in accented English and left. Investigators later believed he may have met Narumi that day, perhaps trying to restart the relationship, perhaps being refused. That part is not something we can state as an absolute fact. But it is a reasonable question raised by the file, because his movements around Narumi's dorm were not random. From December 3rd into December 4th, Nicholas kept returning to the dorm area. He was recorded by cameras around the building again and again, sometimes passing by, sometimes appearing to observe, sometimes taking pictures, then leaving. In total, he was reportedly captured around the dorm area 11 times. This matters because it does not look like someone who casually bumped into an old girlfriend. It looks like someone who had the building in mind before the dinner ever happened. Then came the evening of December 4th. Nicholas and Narumi ate at the restaurant. They left at 21:57. During the drive back, the car was recorded speeding. GPS placed the car back at the dorm. The building camera, old and blurry, captured 2 figures entering. Investigators compared the timing and believed they were Narumi and Nicholas. The footage was not clean enough to feel satisfying. It was not the kind of perfect camera moment that solves everything. But it was enough to matter. And one more detail made it worse: the man appeared to be pulling a suitcase. A suitcase. Remember the missing orange suitcase from room 106? This is the kind of file where one object keeps returning from different angles. A suitcase in a room. A suitcase on camera. A suitcase missing when police arrive. A suitcase that may have been ordinary the day before and terrifying the day after. Police would later believe that Nicholas may have brought his own luggage as a reason to stay the night. Maybe to make Narumi let him into the room. Maybe to appear harmless. Again, we have to be careful. We do not know exactly what was said between them. But the suitcase becomes part of the question: why did it enter the building, and what left the building later? Around 11 p.m., Arthur knocked on Narumi's door. No answer. A text message came from Narumi's phone telling him she was with someone else. If the investigative reconstruction is right, someone inside that room used her phone to remove the one person who was standing closest to the truth. Arthur walked away. A few hours later, around 3:20 a.m., the scream came. 15 students heard it. A British student texted a friend that he had heard what sounded like someone being killed, like a scene from a horror movie. Another student stepped out to check, but found nothing unusual and went back to sleep. The hallway looked normal. The building went quiet again. That is one of the most painful details in the file. Because it shows how thin the line can be between hearing something and understanding it. People woke up. They noticed. Some were disturbed enough to remember it. But no one had enough information to know that the sound might be the last trace of Narumi. And here is the next problem. Nicholas's car did not leave immediately. GPS showed the car moving again only at 4:23 a.m. on December 6th. That means from late on December 4th until early on December 6th, about 30 hours passed. Police believes Nicholas remained in Narumi's dorm room during that time. 30 hours. That is not a moment of panic. That is time. Time to clean. Time to send messages. Time to stage. Time to think. Time to remove. Time to make a room look less like a crime scene and more like a student who had simply gone away. If Narumi had died in that room, then every message after that became part of a second crime. Not just the hiding of a body, but the stealing of a voice. The messages sent after December 5th did not just say "I am fine." They built a story. Narumi had a passport problem. Narumi had to go to Lyon. Narumi had a new boyfriend. Narumi was going away alone. Narumi did not have Wi-Fi. Narumi did not want to be bothered. Every message pushed the same idea: do not look for me yet. This is a cruel kind of delay. Families want to believe messages from their children. A mother sees words from her daughter's account, and for a moment, fear has something to hold on to. Maybe she is busy. Maybe she is angry. Maybe she is making bad choices, but alive. The person writing those messages, if it was not Narumi, was using that hope against them. Police found that the train ticket to Lyon had been purchased from an IP address connected to the area of the shopping center Nicholas had visited. Narumi's Facebook account also connected to Wi-Fi in that same area. And later, on December 13th, the day Nicholas returned to Santiago, Chile, Narumi's Google account made its final sync, showing Santiago as the location. After that, her online presence went completely silent. That last sync is one of those details that feels like a door closing. The account that belonged to a Japanese student who vanished in France suddenly touches Chile, the country Nicholas returned to. Then nothing. No more ordinary digital life. No more messages that feel like Narumi. No more proof that she exists somewhere, alive and choosing silence. Police began building their theory. Nicholas arrived in France. He watched the dorm. He bought fuel, matches, and cleaning product. He drove to a forest. He met Narumi. He brought her back to the dorm. When Arthur appeared, Narumi's phone sent a message to make him leave. The scream happened hours later. The room was cleaned. The phone continued to send messages. On December 6th, the car drove back toward the forest. On December 7th, Nicholas returned the rental car. Employees remembered it clearly because it was very dirty, especially near the driver's side and the trunk area. There was mud, branches, and grass. It took effort to clean. Investigators suspected that Narumi's body had been placed in the missing suitcase and taken out through the rear emergency exit near room 106, an exit without surveillance cameras. They also considered and rejected the idea of dismemberment, because in a small dorm room, without the right conditions, the blood, time, water, and cleanup required would have made it extremely difficult to conceal. The suitcase theory was more consistent with the room, the missing luggage, and the available exit. But the body was never found. And that absence changes everything. Without a body, investigators did not have a confirmed cause of death. They did not have physical injuries to examine. They did not have the final place where Narumi had been left. So the case had to be built like a chain. Every link mattered. If enough links held, the chain could still carry the truth. But if one link broke, the defense would have space to say, doubt. That is why the relationship between Narumi and Nicholas became so important. Not because background replaces evidence. It does not. But because it explains why police stopped seeing Nicholas as a random visitor and started seeing him as someone who had been trying to control Narumi long before France. To understand why Nicholas mattered, we have to step away from room 106 for a moment. Not for a long biography. Just enough to see what Narumi was trying to leave behind. Narumi Kurosaki was born on July 23, 1995, in Edagawa, Tokyo. She was the eldest daughter. Her father had left when she was young, and her mother, Teiko, raised 3 daughters largely on her own, working multiple jobs. Narumi helped care for her younger sisters. She studied hard. According to the file, she would wake around 5 in the morning and use the early daylight to study. That small image tells you a lot. Narumi was not drifting through life. She was building something. She entered the University of Tsukuba. She danced, swam, loved music, and won awards. Her mother and sisters called her their son. That word matters because in the courtroom years later, the family was not just mourning a victim in a legal file. They were mourning the person who held them together. Nicolas Cepeda came from a very different background. He was born in Chile in 1990, 5 years older than Narumi. He had 2 sisters. His father held a senior position at a telecommunications company. His mother had worked in political and municipal circles. His life was described as comfortable, protected, and well-supported. In 2014, Nicholas went to Japan as an exchange student at the University of Tsukuba. He met Narumi at a campus party. She was 19. He was 24. They were young, educated, interested in art, and moving through an international student world where romance can feel bigger because everything is already unfamiliar. They became a couple. In September 2015, Nicholas took Narumi to Chile and introduced her to his family. When the trip ended, Nicholas stayed in Chile to finish his studies, while Narumi returned to Japan. Their relationship became long distance. And this is where the file begins to darken. Nicholas became jealous, suspicious, demanding. He made repeated calls. He checked on her at inconvenient times. He did not want her going to parties or drinking. He wanted her to remove male friends from her life. He wanted a version of Narumi that existed only inside the boundaries he set. That is the part that investigators later focused on. This did not look like ordinary heartbreak. It looked like possession. In April 2016, Nicholas went back to Japan. He reportedly tried to persuade Narumi's mother to trust him with her daughter's future. But Narumi had received a scholarship and was preparing to go to France in August. She no longer wanted that relationship. She broke up with him. And if the file is read carefully, Nicholas did not seem to accept the breakup as the end of love. He treated it like betrayal. He accessed Narumi's accounts. He logged into her digital life again and again. The file describes dozens of unauthorized logins and more than 150 private messages translated in red. Her passwords were easy for him to guess because they were based on personal details, including Naru and her birthday, July 23. He entered her Facebook. He deleted male friends. Even after Narumi left for France, he remained inside the edges of her life through accounts and messages. That matters because when Narumi began forming a relationship with Arthur, Nicholas did not learn about it like a person who had moved on. He learned through the traces he still had access to. According to classmates, Narumi and Arthur were initially friends and only began dating in October. But Nicholas saw Arthur as a threat earlier. He demanded Narumi delete him. Narumi refused. She said she absolutely would not delete Arthur. 2 days later, Nicholas posted a video online. In that video, he laid out conditions. He said Narumi needed to follow those conditions for 2 weeks, rebuild trust, pay a cost for what she had done. The conditions were extreme. She had to become the best girl from that day on. She could not get angry. She could not make demands. She could not argue. Listen to what that means beneath the words. He was not asking for a conversation. He was setting rules for her behavior as if she were something he could correct. From the time Narumi arrived in France, the two exchanged around 980 messages. Many were filled with conflict, jealousy, and pressure. Their final exchange was especially painful. Narumi told Nicholas she would never forget what had happened around a possible pregnancy, and accused him of not taking responsibility for her body. Nicholas said he had told her to see a doctor, that he wanted to build a family, and that she was selfishly destroying them. Narumi answered with one blunt rejection, telling him to go away. About the pregnancy issue, the file is careful. French investigators did not find records of an abortion, and Japanese information did not confirm it either. It may have been handled privately. It may have been a misunderstanding caused by a health issue. We cannot state what was never proven. But we can say this: the subject was clearly a deep wound between them. On September 23, Narumi texted her mother and said the breakup with Nicholas was final. 3 days later, Nicholas left Japan and returned to Chile. For Narumi, that may have felt like the ending. She was in France. She had a scholarship. She had a new academic path. She had Arthur. She had space. But the GPS data later suggested Nicholas had not ended anything inside his own mind. He booked a car in France weeks ahead of time. He flew across the world. He drove to her dorm in the middle of the night. He watched the building. He bought cleaning product, fuel, and matches. He went to a forest. And then, on December 4th, he sat across from Narumi at what may have been her last dinner. On December 23, French authorities working with Chilean officials issued an arrest warrant for Nicholas. On December 29, Nicholas went to Chilean police and gave a statement. His explanation was very different from the investigative reconstruction. He said he had traveled to France for academic reasons, to explore graduate study opportunities. He said he had not gone there to hurt Narumi. According to him, he met her by chance, or because she invited him. He claimed she was the one who wanted to reconcile. He described the dinner as emotional. Their hands touched, he said, and both realized they still loved each other. They returned to her dorm and had sex. When Arthur knocked on the door, Nicholas claimed Narumi told him to stay quiet. He said the messages to Arthur were sent by Narumi. On the surface, it is a complete story. Former lovers meet again. Old feelings return. The new boyfriend arrives at the door. Narumi avoids confrontation. Nicholas leaves later, and her disappearance has nothing to do with him. But a story being complete does not make it true. The question is whether it survives contact with the details. And the details were not kind to Nicholas. He could not explain where Narumi's phone went. He could not explain who sent messages to her mother and sisters after she vanished. He could not explain why the IP address connected to the Lion ticket led back to the shopping center he had visited. He could not explain why her Facebook account connected to Wi-Fi in that same area. He could not explain why the final Google sync appeared in Santiago, Chile, the day he returned there. The waitress from the restaurant also did not describe two people rediscovering love. She said Narumi seemed cold, distant, not very willing to be there. There was no obvious physical closeness. The waitress even thought they might be co-workers. That does not match Nicholas's version of two former lovers suddenly realizing they were still in love. Then there was the scream. Nicholas claimed the sound students heard was connected to sex, and that the loud noise came from knocking into something. But students insisted the sound was a scream. Not laughter. Not pleasure. Not a normal late-night noise. A scream like something from a horror film. And if Nicholas's explanation is true, then the questions multiply. Why did Narumi never appear again? Why did her messages change tone? Why was the room unusually tidy? Why did her coat and wallet stay behind? Why was the suitcase gone? Why did the rented car drive to the forest? Why was the car returned with mud, branches, and grass in the trunk area? Why ask others for help translating phrases that looked like the fake messages sent after her disappearance? Because yes, that became another key piece. Two Japanese friends of Nicholas told investigators that after Narumi vanished, Nicholas asked them to help translate Japanese phrases. Phrases like "I have a new boyfriend" and "I want to go alone." Phrases that sounded very close to what Narumi's family and Arthur had received. He also asked them to delete the chat history. Maybe at the time, those friends did not understand what they were helping with. But once the case was known, the meaning changed completely. Another witness came from within Nicholas's own family. His cousin Juan, a medical student, said that after Nicholas left France, they spent time together in Barcelona. During those days, Nicholas asked several questions related to death. How does a person die by hanging? What signs show whether someone was hanged? Because Narumi's body had never been found, investigators could not confirm a cause of death. But Juan's account led police to consider the possibility that she had been strangled or suffocated. We have to be careful here. No body means no direct forensic confirmation. But the questions were strange enough to matter. Juan also noticed that Nicholas spoke about Narumi inconsistently, sometimes using the past tense, sometimes the present. Nicholas asked him not to tell anyone they had met in Barcelona, saying it was because of a conflict with his father and because he had traveled without telling the family. Later, when the case began receiving attention in Japan, France, and Chile, Nicholas called Juan again and said families should support each other during difficult times. Juan interpreted the call as pressure to stay quiet. He reported it to police. Look at the pattern now. Unauthorized access to Narumi's accounts before the disappearance. Translation help after the disappearance. Messages from Narumi's phone that did not sound like Narumi. A train ticket that looked like misdirection. A car that moved between the dorm, a shopping center, and a forest. A rented car returned dirty. A missing orange suitcase. A scream. A cousin hearing questions about death. Each detail alone can be attacked. That is what makes no body cases so difficult. But together, they created a shape. Narumi had vanished physically. Then, in a way, she vanished digitally too. Her accounts went silent. Her phone disappeared. Her passport disappeared. Her suitcase disappeared. And her body was nowhere. The search for her remains became massive. Because Nicholas had purchased fuel, investigators considered the possibility that her body had been burned. Authorities examined about 800 tons of incinerated waste residue from the greater Besançon area. Nothing. They searched forests. Nothing. They searched waterways and areas near the French-Swiss border. Nothing. Divers went underwater. Still nothing. 3 years. Around 20,000 hectares. Thousands of hours. Repeated ground searches and underwater searches. Not one bone. Not one clear trace. Not the suitcase. Not the final answer. This is the part of the case that is almost impossible to reduce to legal language. For a court, no body is an evidentiary problem. For a family, it is a wound that cannot close. Narumi's mother and sisters traveled between prosecutors, courts, schools, and forests in a foreign country. They were not only looking for justice. They were looking for a place to stand and say goodbye. Teiko, Narumi's mother, even went to Chile at one point. She remembered crossing paths with Nicholas on a bridge. According to the file, he seemed startled, lowered his head, said nothing, and walked past her into the crowd. For years, Nicholas remained largely free while the extradition process dragged on, facing restrictions but not the kind of punishment Narumi's family believed he deserved. Meanwhile, the family was collapsing. The file describes Teiko struggling with self-harm and suicidal thoughts. One sister lost a serious amount of weight and left school. There were nights when a sister slept only 1 hour because she was watching over their mother, afraid she might hurt herself. This is why the missing body matters so much. It is not only a clue. It is not only a legal obstacle. It is the difference between mourning and endless waiting. By 2018, the search for Narumi's remains was suspended. Not because the answer had been found. Because the search had run out of direction. The forest did not give her back. The water did not give her back. The ashes did not give her back. But the case kept moving. In the following year, French authorities sent boxes of investigative files to Chile and requested Nicolas's extradition on a charge of premeditated murder. That process was slow and complicated. France and Chile did not have the kind of simple extradition path that makes cases move quickly. So while the evidence sat in boxes, the years kept passing. In January 2020, Nicolas's extradition hearing took place in Chile. He was not initially held in an ordinary prison setting but was placed under restriction. He first refused to provide DNA. Later, comparisons showed Nicolas's DNA inside Narumi's room, along with other expected profiles. Of course, DNA in a room does not automatically prove murder when Nicolas himself admitted he had been there. But it mattered because it confirmed his physical presence in the private space where investigators believed Narumi had died. On May 18, the Chilean Supreme Court accepted the extradition request. On July 23, Chile handed Nicolas over to France. That date is almost too painful. July 23 was Narumi's birthday. If she had been alive, she would have turned 25. Instead, on her birthday, the man accused of killing her was finally sent to the country where she disappeared. In March 2022, Nicolas went on trial in France. He still denied killing Narumi. He said he had not gone looking for her. He claimed he learned about her disappearance only later, from a professor at the University of Tsukuba. When asked why he had gone near Narumi's dorm so many times, he said he arrived in Besançon later than planned, had trouble finding internet, and parked near the university because it was safe and free. That explanation sounds simple. But the GPS data makes it difficult. Because he did not just park once. He appeared repeatedly. He moved around the dorm area. He went to the shopping center. He bought the fuel can, matches, and cleaning product. He drove to the forest. He returned to the dorm. He stayed inactive for around 30 hours while Narumi was never seen again. When asked what happened inside the room during those 30 hours, Nicolas said he and Narumi watched movies and had sex like they used to. Investigators asked how many times they had sex. First, he said he could not specify. Then he said 4 times. But police searched the entire building and found no condom. If his version were true, physical traces of consensual sex could have helped him. Their absence did not prove murder, but it weakened the story. When asked about it, Nicolas said he forgot where he threw them away. The cleaning product, he said, was for stains. He claimed a child had bumped into him while he was eating and food had spilled on his clothes. The fuel can, he said, came from habit. He had worked with a car rental company in the United States and liked to carry fuel in case he could not find a gas station. The matches did not receive a convincing explanation. Again, one explanation may sound possible. But when all of them are needed at once, the story begins to feel overloaded. He needs innocent reasons for the dorm visits. Innocent reasons for the cleaning product. Innocent reasons for the fuel. Innocent reasons for the forest. Innocent reasons for the missing phone. Innocent reasons for the fake-sounding messages. Innocent reasons for the final accounts sink in Chile. Innocent reasons for asking friends to translate Japanese phrases. Innocent reasons for asking his cousin about death. The defense tried to bring Arthur back into the center of suspicion. From one angle, it made sense as a strategy. Arthur was the current boyfriend. He had been hurt by the messages. He had entered the room before police. His DNA was in the room. But investigators said Arthur had a strong alibi and no evidence connected him to the wider chain. His DNA in the room of his girlfriend was not surprising. Nicholas's DNA also could be explained by his admitted presence, yes. But Nicholas had much more around him than DNA. Nicholas told the court he loves Narumi and still loved her. But police pointed out that in October 2016, he had started a relationship with a German girlfriend, and that relationship had continued. So he had a new girlfriend, but still crossed the world to confront his ex. Prosecutors argued that what he felt for Narumi was not love. It was control. A psychological expert described Nicholas as severely lacking empathy and narcissistic. The expert said speaking with him felt almost like speaking with someone from another planet, because the way he perceived the world and emotions seemed so different from ordinary people. On April 7, Nicholas appeared in court and cried. He said he knew he was not perfect, but he did not kill Narumi. He said he also wanted to know where she was. In the courtroom, Takeo and Narumi's sister held a photo album close. They listened to a man who said he wanted answers too, while they believed he was the reason they had none. A week later, the court convicted Nicholas of murder. Despite the lack of a body, the court found the chain of indirect evidence strong enough. He received 28 years in prison. The sentence initially included time to be served in France and Chile, confiscation of his assets in France, a permanent ban from entering France, and compensation of €180,000 to Narumi's family. But the case still did not end. Nicholas appealed. The case was heard again, and the conviction was upheld, with the prison sentence changed so that all of it would be served in France. His lawyers appealed again. A procedural issue appeared because some evidence introduced during the appeal had not been properly disclosed to the defense in advance. In February 2025, the ruling was overturned and the case was sent back for another trial. Think about what that means for the family. The case had already crossed countries. It had already taken years. They had already listened to the scream, the messages, the suitcase, the forest, the GPS, the fake explanations, again and again. And now they had to hear it all again. In early 2026, the third trial took place. Nicholas was 35. Nearly 10 years had passed since Narumi disappeared. He still said he did not kill her. He also complained about prison conditions, saying they were too harsh and left him unable to communicate with the outside world. The defense introduced a new point. In Narumi's room, besides Narumi, Arthur, and Nicholas, there was DNA from a fourth unidentified person. The defense argued that Nicholas should not be treated as the only possible suspect. That detail could make anyone pause. A fourth DNA profile. An unknown person. In a case with no body, any unexplained trace can become a door for doubt. But the court did not accept it as enough to break the chain. On March 26, the court again found Nicholas guilty. This time, the sentence became life imprisonment. The defense denounced the decision as unfair and said it would appeal again to the highest court. So even after years of investigation and multiple trials, the file remains unsettled in one essential way. The courts reached decisions. But Narumi was still missing. There is a Facebook post from Narumi dated November 4, 2016. She wrote that she was grateful for the chance to explore a new place and learn more about what was happening around the world. That kind of sentence should belong to an ordinary student life. A young woman abroad. Curious. Ambitious. Looking at the world and believing it is opening. A month later, she was gone. Her mother had once wanted her daughter to travel far, to see the world, to grow into the life she had worked so hard to reach. By the end, Takeo's wish had become much smaller and much more painful. She wanted to bring Narumi home. In every trial, Takeo carried a photo album with pictures of Narumi from childhood onward. That album is one of the quietest and heaviest objects in the case. Not as legally sharp as GPS data. Not as suspicious as the missing suitcase. Not as dramatic as the scream. But it reminds everyone what the file is actually about. Narumi is not just a name attached to a cross-border legal battle. She was a daughter, a sister, a student, a person whose family called her the sun. And maybe that is why this case stays in the mind. It is not only because there was no body. It is because there were so many traces, and still no final place. There was a scream, but no rescue. A room, but no body. Messages, but not her voice. A suitcase, but no suitcase found. A forest, but no remains. A conviction, then appeal, then conviction, then overturned ruling, then another conviction. Every answer came with another absence beside it. If we return to the beginning, the whole file starts with details that could have been dismissed. A room too clean. A code left behind. A passport story that points to the wrong city. A train ticket nobody saw her use. A message introducing a boyfriend her family already knew. A sentence that did not sound like Narumi. A car that went to a forest before and after the disappearance. A dirty trunk. A missing orange suitcase. Tiny things. Almost ordinary things. But together, they formed a path. And that is the real lesson in this file. In some cases, the truth does not arrive as one dramatic confession. It appears as a series of wrong notes. A message that feels slightly off. A route that makes no sense. A camera image too blurry to solve everything but too important to ignore. A person who says he came for school but keeps circling a dorm. A phone that keeps speaking after the person behind it may already be gone. Gray Verdict Files does not tell a case like this to turn grief into spectacle. The reason this file matters is because it shows how dangerous control can become when it hides under the name of love. It also shows how a person's digital life can be used against them, how a phone can continue performing normality while something terrible may have already happened behind a closed door. And the most painful question remains the simplest one. Where is Narumi? The court may say what happened. The evidence may point in one direction. The timeline may be strong. The GPS may speak. The messages may expose themselves. But for a mother waiting to bring her daughter home, none of that replaces a body. None of that replaces the chance to say goodbye. A scream lasted only a few seconds in a student dorm in France. Then came silence. Then came messages pretending there was no reason to worry. And nearly 10 years later, the silence is still there, because the girl from room 106 has still not been found.